Good afternoon. In this operating system lecture series, we have been looking at sort of various components and concepts that are sort of essential for an operating system and things that make up how an operating system functions and how sort of that basic element of software layer of computing works. So in the previous week, we looked at processes, and when we were discussing processes, we said that we will be running multiple processes in a computer. So when we take a typical multi-programming computer, we are expected to run multiple programs at the same time. So in such a computer, when we are running multiple processes, we said that we will have to make certain decisions as to which process can run at a particular time, and also what are the other resources and how they can be shared across these various processes. So that is what we will be focusing on today in this lecture on scheduling. So one of the main challenges that we would have in terms of scheduling is deciding on who gets to use the CPU. So the reason why we would have this situation is because we are going to have CPU that is going to be shared by a number of processes. So we said that in a multi-programming computer that we would have a number of processes. So even though we could have a number of processes, they all need to access the same CPU. So that is what we are trying to solve in terms of scheduling. So it is like each process would need to execute some code, and that code execution can happen only in a CPU. So in such a situation, we need to decide which process gets to use that CPU and for how long it can use it, and when the next process can get a chance, and so on. So it is like there is a shared resource, and that shared resource needs to be shared among multiple people. So each process would need some level of processing for its purpose, and different processes may have different purposes, different priorities, and so on. So depending on all these things, the CPU will have to be allocated or given access to each of these processes. So that is the underlying sort of fundamental of scheduling, deciding on who gets to use the CPU and when they get to use the CPU, not just which process, and then also deciding on for how long they can use a particular process. So these two are the main things that we will be trying to do when we are doing scheduling. So when we think about processes in a sort of a scheduling point of view, we can sort of think about how different processes behave in a computing environment. So what we would have is we can have few different types of processes, and here we are looking at them from the perspective of how they interact with input-output devices, because one of the main factors when a process would stop and have to wait is when it is waiting for something to happen related to input-output. Say for example, if you are running a process and that is coming up with a pop-up message and asking enter the password, and until you enter the password, that process has to stop and wait and do nothing. So, or if it is, say for example, in an output example, if it is printing something, it has to again wait until it finishes printing before it can continue doing the task, depending on how the process is designed. Regardless, these input-output tasks are one of the common reasons why processes would stop doing something. And we can identify that based on what we call as a CPU burst. And what do we mean by CPU burst? A CPU burst is a period of time a process is actively using the CPU. So here the process is using the CPU during this period of time, then it is using here, it is using here, and it is using here. So those are the periods it is using the CPU. But then again, there are other times where it is waiting for certain input output activity to complete, and at that time it is only waiting. So that is what we would identify as a IO waiting time. So between these two, we can have processes that are sort of behaving differently. So in the case of process A, for example, it has a long CPU burst, because what it does is it spends most of the time executing some code. It spends most of the time executing some instructions in the CPU. So it has a long CPU burst. It does the processing for most of the time and sometimes waits for short period of time. Then in the case of B, for example, what we have is it only has a short CPU burst. So it has this shorter bursts of CPU usage, but on other times it is waiting for input output. So if we take the whole period of time here, it is spending most of the time waiting for the input output tasks to complete. So between these two, we can identify these two processes as CPU bound processes that spend most of the time in processing, and IO bound processes that are spending most of the time with input output tasks. So with that, what we would have is, especially in the case of IO bound processes, we would have this time that is normally not used by a particular processor to do some processing, particular process to do any processing. It is sort of unused CPU time. This is also one of the reasons why we would want to do scheduling, because to maximize the utilization of the CPU, something needs to be processed in the CPU at every possible time. If something is waiting, if we can do some other work, then that is a highly utilizable time. Say for example, if we were given a couple of things to do and we have to wait for someone to give something to complete, then we may have to go and do something else. Say if there are a couple of assignments, one is a group assignment and you have a individual assignment. If you have to wait for another group member to complete and give something for the group assignment, you might as well do the individual assignment at that point in time and then go back to the group assignment. So similarly, we can have processes going back and forth depending on when they are using and not using the CPU. So that is also a reason why we would do some form of scheduling. So what we would try to achieve is what is the goal that we would have here is to have a situation where the CPU utilization is high and job throughput is also high. What do we mean by CPU utilization? That is, for how long, within a period of time, how much the CPU is utilized. So CPU is used. Say if in 1 hour period of time, if the CPU is used for like 55 minutes, that is a fairly high CPU utilization. Whereas if the CPU is used only for like 10 minutes, that is low CPU utilization. Then job throughput is again within 1 hour time, how many jobs are actually completed, how many are waiting, how many are completed. So that completion is throughput. So our goal would be to increase both of these, utilization of the CPU but also throughput of job completion. So both of these things we will try to focus on when we are doing scheduling in multi-programming computers. So this would be in addition to like things about how do we context switch. So when we have multiple processes, in the previous week we looked at when we want to switch to a different process, we have to put few things in the process table and go to the next process and then come back to continue from where we left off. So such things we will still do in this as well, but in addition to that, scheduling will make two key decisions. Scheduling will make the decision, one, about which process to switch. So context switching and process queues and so on will tell us like how to do that, but process scheduling would decide which process that will be go into switching. So which process is the decision that is made by scheduling. Then it will also make the decision about how long that process will run. So it will decide on how long that process will run, and then at what point that will be removed and the next process will be taken in. And it will also make the decision about which is the next process that we will be taking in. So that is the two main sort of questions scheduling will try to answer, that is which process to run next and to how long to run that process. So this decision making regarding scheduling will be more important when we have more than two processes that are ready to run. Say if we have only two processes running and or if you only have one process running, then there's no decision making. Even if there's like two processes running, again the decision making is like going from one to the other and to the other. So if we have like only two processes, so there's again not a lot of decision in terms of which process to run, because there's only one more process available. But if we have like more than that number of processes readily available to run, then we have to make a decision about which of these processes that we need to choose to run next. So if we have finished with one, which is the one that will have to run next? So that is the decision that we will be deciding upon. So that decision will dictate the process that is going to occupy the key resources. So it is going to occupy the CPU, it is going to occupy any other auxiliary components that is relevant to the processing of this process. So program counters and all these various things inside the CPU and sometimes even outside the CPU, all these components will have all these resources will be given in the control of that particular process. So that process will have ability to use those resources. The operating system component that will do this work is called the scheduler. So the operating system component that is going to do scheduling is what we would call as the scheduler, and this component will use various scheduling algorithms to make this decision. So this decision making will be, so this decision about which process to run next, this decision about how to do the switching, to switch to what, will be based upon this scheduling algorithm. So that would be, these are the sort of key components of underlying components of doing scheduling in an operating system. That is the scheduler that is going to do this and the scheduling algorithm about how it is going to do that. And even in the previous week, we briefly sort of touched upon threads, and when we looked at threads, we said threads are also somewhat similar to processes, even though they are somewhat lightweight, so they may be slightly different. So in terms of scheduling also, the concepts are going to be fairly similar to scheduling threads and scheduling processes. There may be slight differences because, say for example, we looked at that processes are much more heavier, there's more information that needs to be swapped across, whereas if we are doing thread scheduling, it is more lightweight, so we can more easily do the swapping or switching between threads. So because of that, there may be some differences, but mainly threads and processes can be scheduled largely in a similar manner. So in the context of this lecture, we will be focusing about these approaches together for both threads and processes, and we may use the term jobs to mean both processes and threads. So those are anything that can be scheduled. We may call them as jobs, and I may also use these terms interchangeably. I may say jobs or processes, but what I mean is the concepts can also apply to both processes and threads. So the next thing that we will have to do is once we use these components, the scheduler and the scheduling algorithm, the main decisions that they will have to make is about when to schedule. So of the two questions, when, which process, and how long, then it will have to decide when that thing needs to happen. So when to stop and when to start. So there are a number of key ways or key instances where scheduling can happen. So in the example of, say, when we were discussing about processes, there were instances where processes can be created, where processes can be terminated, and that will also impact upon when we will do scheduling. So this is also similar to that, but also have a relationship to that as well. So one of the main ways is when a job is created. So when a process or thread is created, that job is created, that is a point in time where that decision have to be made. Say a job is created, so now what to do? So now there's this new process. Do we run this process, or do we wait for the running process to finish? Then, for example, if a running job stops, so a job is running, then that job stops. So if it is stopping, then again we have to think about what to do now. So whether we wait doing nothing or we go to the next job. So again, that is again a reason where we would do scheduling. Then the third category or third situation would be if we have allocated, say, this period of time, this amount of time for a process, and if that time period has finished, if it is like, say, if we gave it, say, 1000 milliseconds, and when 1000 milliseconds is completed, then we have to go to the next process. So then again we have to do scheduling to choose what is the next process. Then a new job creation can do, and also say if something gets blocked because of IO, so it gets blocked because of IO, and then when the input output that it was waiting is ready, then that input output would come back and give an interrupt saying now it is ready to run. So again, at that point it has to make a decision about what it needs to do. So these are some of the instances where we would have to schedule. So if a running process or running job exits, then we have to choose a new one to run. If the running one blocks, we have to choose a new one to run. If the running one finishes its allocated time, we have to choose a new one to run. If a new job is created, then we have to again decide whether to run that one or the currently running one. Then if IO interrupt comes back to say the block is now, whatever the reason that a block was there is now resolved, then again we have to decide whether to run that or continue running what we are already doing. So these are 5 main reasons why we would want to, or when we would want to do scheduling. So these are 5 instances where we would have to think about what is the process to run next. Are there any questions on the things that we covered so far? If there are any questions as we go along, always put them on the chat window so I could come back to it and we can discuss as we go along. So when we do the scheduling, we would be focusing on a number of things and we would want to sort of improve these things in certain ways. So we already said when we were discussing about why we do scheduling that one of the reasons why we would want to one of the things that we would want to improve is throughput. So that is the number of jobs that are completed within a given period of time. So we would, if we are taking say a 1 hour period, it is the count as to how many jobs are completed within that period of time. Then the other thing that we would want to improve by scheduling is turnaround time. So what do we mean by turnaround time is, if we start a job at a particular point in time, then how long does it take for it to finish or like completing. So say for example, in this diagram, in this timeline, let's say at the very start, at this point, all the processes started at the same time. All of them started here at the same time. So now if we say P4 completes here, P1 completes here, P3 completes here, and P2 completes there. So the time it took for P2 to complete is this, but the turnaround time is this, because it started here, it waited for a bit of time, and then it came to the end. So that is the turnaround time for that process. Then the next one is waiting time. So again, if we take the example of P2, it came here, but it is actually starting execution here. So this period of time is the waiting time for P2. And then in certain situations, in certain scenarios, we may also want to, especially in the case of real-time operating systems, and we would discuss about real-time operating systems towards the end of this course. And in those cases, we would also want to do what is called meeting deadlines. Say a simple example to understand this could be, a simple example could be, say if we have a system where something needs to complete at a particular point in time. Say for example, let's take the example of a automobile or a car or something that is controlled by a computer. So whether it could be a self-driving car or whether it could be a car that has a drive-by-wire. So it is some decisions are made through some microcontroller or a computer. So there, if say for example a decision to give a brake at a particular point in time, then that should be done at a particular exact deadline, and we cannot delay that. In operations like that, we would schedule our processes or activities will be scheduled in a manner that focusing on keeping up with that deadline. So that is also something that we would consider in certain scheduling situations. So there is a question on the on chat. It is about if there are 4 threads on a process. So if there are 4 threads on a process, on a processor, it means the processor can run the 4 processors jobs at once. So there are 2 things. So if we have 4 threads waiting to run, so that is one thing. So we have 4 threads that we can schedule. Then maybe, I'm not sure if your question, you are meaning there are 4 cores in the processor. Say if we have a processor that only has one core, that means only one arithmetic logic unit and everything else. So in that case, we can only run one item at a time. But if we have a multi-core processor, say we have 4 cores, in that case we will be able to run 4 different things at the same time. Okay, so the processor has 2 cores and 4 threads. Okay, so you're asking about a multi-core, multi-threaded processor. So again, as we sort of briefly touched upon in the previous week, when we are discussing most of the concepts, we are mainly talking about single core, single threaded processors. So that is, they can only execute one thing at a time, just for the simplicity. But again, in the case of a multi-core, multi-threaded processor, yes, then in that case, the threads, depending on, like again, especially in the case of threads, or even like we can divide them into each of those, and depending on again the exact CPU architecture, certain CPU architectures, even if they have again, if they have how, say for example, program counters, ALUs and other internals of the CPU are dedicated for each core, that will depend on whether we will be execute individual jobs on individual, like multiple jobs on individual cores, and multiple jobs on each of those will depend on the exact architecture. But yes, it is possible in such a, like say, a multi-core, multi-threaded processor. It would be possible to run that number of jobs at the same time. But again, that will also depend on exactly how those jobs or those processes will also have to accommodate or cater to running in that sort of an environment. So it also depends on, so it will depend on mainly 2 things: the hardware architecture that we are using there, and also it would depend on the software architecture, so to speak. The structure, how it is programmed, will also dictate what can and cannot run like that. Okay, so when we think about scheduling, so we have a number of things that we would focus on when we are in terms of the performance of the computer, the performance of the operating system. But then we would also think about have certain objectives that we would want to fulfill when we are implementing a scheduling algorithm or a scheduler. So the first thing, or one of the main things that we'll have to do in a sort of a multi-processor or rather multi-programming computing environment, we would want to ensure some level of fairness, because the CPU is a shared resource that is shared among these various processes, and all of them want to access to that shared resource. So all of them needs to be given some level of access in a fair manner. So we cannot have only one process using the CPU all the time and others are waiting. So it is like any sort of shared resource problem. We will have to share that resource accordingly with all the processes that are there in that operating system environment. Then, even though we may do that, we may think about fairness a lot and give chance to every process. It is not that all the processes are made equally. There could be processes that are more important than some others. So again, depending on the nature of the operating environment, we may dictate some as more important processes and some as less important processes. And depending on that differentiation also, we would decide which has the higher priority, and we may give more chances or immediate chances to those processes that we see as high priority processes. Then In terms of efficiency, what we would try to do is we would try to make the best use of the equipment. So that is where we would try to make like the processor run something at all the time. So rather than it is waiting, idling, doing nothing, we would want it to run something all the time. So that is improving the efficiency. So we are making the best use of the equipment by running some processing at all the time. Then we would also do what is called, if we have processes that are behaving well, and what we mean by that is, say if we want processes to do certain things in certain manner, utilize resources responsibly and certain things, and we can set these parameters, the operating system can set certain parameters as to what it expects from certain processes, and if processes adhere to that without degrading the performance of the operating system environment, the operating system may give additional like sort of encourage that behavior and give it more opportunities to process or more opportunities to run. So again, these are some of the approaches that operating system can take based on how a process is behaving when it is executing. Then one of the other things that we may have to think about is, not all the processes are going to have the same load. So that is, certain processes will have to do a lot more processing and maybe a lot more resource heavy, that they may need a lot of memory, a lot of other resources and so on. Say for example graphics processing and things like that, they may require a lot of additional resources. So in that case also, we would still want them to run in a acceptable manner. Rather than them trying to run a lot and failing, we would want them to have a way where they can still run in a graceful manner. So we want them to have sort of reduced performance but at a graceful level. So they are not going to crash and stop. Rather they will be able to run slowly or in a less faster pace but still continue to run. And then one of the other things that we may have to also focus is, not all the processes are going to do the same things. Say for example, an application where you are interacting will have a different requirement, like when you are typing some document, will have a different requirement to a application like playing movies. So different things will have different interaction with users and other resources, and the scheduling will have to cater to all these differences as well. So that is also something that we would be focusing on when we think about how the scheduler is going to do scheduling, and it will take into account all these objectives and come up with a suitable scheduling algorithm for a particular operating environment. So that is the basics of scheduling. So why we would want to do scheduling, how we would do scheduling, and some of the things that we would consider when we are doing scheduling. So now let's focus on the how part, how this scheduling is going to happen, and that would also depend on the type of systems that we talk about. So we would have a number of ways to do scheduling, how we do the scheduling, and that is dictated or that is explained using scheduling algorithms. And these scheduling algorithms will differ from system to system or type of application to another type of application, and they will have different priorities for each of these types as well. So we can sort of look at sort of three categories of these systems and three categories of scheduling algorithms. So the first one is batch systems. So these are systems that are running periodic tasks. There are no users interacting with these systems. They are, say for example, a bill generation type of a system is automatically taking information from a database and then processing that. In that case, there's no user interaction there. So here what we can do is we can continue to run the process until it needs to stop for some other reason. Say for example, when we contrast that with, say, so if this is sort of the timeline that we have, in a sort of a normal operating environment, what we would have is we would run one process, stop that, go to the next process, stop that, and maybe then come back to that one and come back to the other one. So we will go back and forth between each other in a normal interactive system. But in a batch system, the advantage we would have is we can start and run until it needs to stop, say for example an IO reason. As long as it doesn't have to stop, we can continue to run because no users are waiting for it to finish, like waiting for a particular instance of a process to finish. So we can continue to run like that in batch systems. So we will be able to run for longer time before we have to do the switching. The alternative scenario is what we would call as interactive systems. So these are the systems where we would have to go back and forth between each of the processes, and then we have to make the decision as to what to run next and so on. The reason being, say for example, if we are running multiple applications in an operating system, so in parallel, all of them would do certain computing, and as users, we would also expect all of them to produce outputs at the same time. Say for example, if you are playing some music, maybe playing some video and browsing something on the internet or reading a document, we would expect all of these things to happen at the same time, not to like one is stopped and then the other one happens, then the other one happens. So we would not like something like that to happen. So a good example could be like any sort of, when you are running multiple processes, especially like playing multimedia kind of a thing is a good example. Say multimedia is playing in the background and you are doing something in the foreground, and both of those things are happening at the same time. So that is what we would want interactive systems to do. No one process can utilize or use the processor most of the time. They need to be shared across all of them. Then real-time systems, what we would want with real-time systems is we want them to finish when they need to finish. So we want them to meet the deadlines when they need to complete. So if something needs to happen at a particular deadline, we want them to finish at this particular deadline. Because in real-time system, if we go past that deadline, we may come to a point where we are breaking that barrier, and that may cause certain damages. In certain systems, it may be fatal. Some people may die kind of a situation. In some things, it may cause property damage or things like that. So in such a situation, we would want them to do things at the time that they need to do. So again, those scheduling algorithms will have to think about those. So then, in terms of scheduling, from the perspective of the process, we can again categorize them into two categories. So if a process that is running on the CPU is using the CPU and keeping control of the CPU until it finishes, then we would call it a non-preemptive scheduling. Here we cannot preempt the process to stop and give the CPU voluntarily. It has to finish on its own and then give the processor back. Whereas in preemptive scheduling, we can instruct the running process to stop and release the CPU. So in non-preemptive one, the process itself will make that decision voluntarily, and we cannot instruct that to stop and go to the next one. Whereas in preemptive scheduling, we will be able to instruct it from externally and then ask it to release the CPU to be used by another process. So that is also a difference that we would see from the perspective of the processes. Then with these scheduling algorithms and these scheduling algorithms for different types of systems, we would have a number of different scheduling goals. So what we can see here is, say in the case of any system, there are some goals that are common across all the systems. So that is, if we want to ensure fairness, so all the processes get access in a fair manner, then we want to, if there are certain policies that we define, sort of system-wide policies, then again we want to keep that up as well as we go along. And if there are like multiple resources, multiple parts of the system, again we want to keep all of them busy sort of equally if possible. So these are sort of goals that are common to all the type of systems. But then if we take, for example, batch systems, here the main focus is going to be about throughput and utilization. So here, if we run a set of jobs overnight, within an 8-hour period, how many bills can be generated? And within that period time, for how long the CPU was running some active instructions. And we would also want to make sure from the time it started and to the time it finished, what is the total turnaround time. So these are the things that we would focus when we are talking about batch systems. On the other hand, when we talk about interactive systems, here the focus is going to be different. Here the focus is going to be about responsiveness. Say for example, when I am drawing something now, I want it to be drawing in a faster manner. So one of the problems that we are facing now is there is a significant lag between my voice and video. That is an issue in this interactive system that we are facing. Then we would also want to ensure some level of proportionality. So one, say if I click on this screen, that should do something immediately, so that is responsive, it reacts immediately. Then proportionalities, we may expect different things from different types of applications and systems. So if we expect that to respond within 1 millisecond, we need to ensure that. If in certain things can do it like in 1 minute and users would be okay with that, then we may prioritize that application less and have to focus on something more. So certain things can run in the background, for example, and certain things you have to be interacting with the users and they may expect certain sort of timely responses. So that is sort of the main focus in interactive systems. So when we say interactive systems, these are the type of operating systems and computers that you would use normally in your sort of day-to-day life. Then the third category of systems is the real-time systems. And with real-time systems, as we said, the main sort of goal that we have is meeting deadlines. So if something needs to happen at a particular point in time, that needs to happen. But then also, we would want it to be predictable. Say, for example, if we have or like a auto driving car or an autopilot system for a vehicle, then that needs to produce outcomes in a predictable manner. It needs to produce said outcomes in sort of said time intervals in a predictable manner. That is, if an instruction is given, then it should lead to an output within a period of time. Otherwise, it could be a problem in these real-time systems. So that is also something that we would focus in these. So there would be some common requirements or common goals for all systems, but other than that, we would also have some requirements So these will be the common goals that we would have across different types of systems, and then each type of system will have its own sort of goals as well. So for the rest of the lesson, we will be focusing on a number of scheduling algorithms, and we'll look at a number of scheduling algorithms for each of these different types of systems, for batch systems, interactive systems, and real-time systems. So we'll look at them from an example point of view to understand how these different types of algorithms are suitable for these different applications, because different systems had different goals. So one of the simplest algorithm, and one of the, we would call it sort of a real world algorithm that we would practice in our day-to-day life regularly, is the first come first served algorithm. So you may have come across this in sort of few other courses as well, talking about first come first served. So it is like, if there are a number of jobs, and if a jobs arrive at a queue in a particular order, we would process them in that order as they are arriving into the queue. So the processing order will be from the start to top, and if a job needs to be rescheduled, it will always go back to the bottom. So we will go one after the other in that queue. So here it could also be, in most cases, a non-preemptive scheduling way. So that is, what we would do is, we would let this one finish before starting the next one, rather than swapping across, unless there is some input-output waiting. Especially in sort of batch systems where we would normally use this, we would let one job to finish before going into the next job. Then also, we would treat all the jobs equally. Again, there are no priorities. Everything is in the queue, one after the other. They will have to wait until they get their time to get processed. So there's no issue there in terms of deciding upon which is a higher priority process or lesser priority process. Then we would also have to think about what to do when a process blocks. So for example, if this process stops for input-output, then the only possibility is it cannot come back and continue here. It will have to come to the end of the queue and start again. So it is similar to, like, if you are standing in a supermarket queue and say you will have to wait for your turn to have the bill made for you. But if you go back to take some more items from the supermarket and come back to the queue, you will have to join the queue at the end. I mean, sometimes you can ask to join and join the queue in sort of a local context, but ideally you will go back in the queue. So that is how a first come first serve processing would work. And because it is a batch system, this is an acceptable way of how we can do that as well. So in this case, what we have is, we have all these processes, all P1, P2 and P3, all of them we are assuming are starting at the same time. So then the duration is the period of time each process needs for its execution. So P1 needs a lot more time than P2 and P3. But because all of them arrived in this particular order, even though at the same time they would still come slightly one after the other, then we will be prioritizing on that arrival order. So we will first go to 1, then 2, and then 3. So in this context, what we would see here is, say if the process started here, first P1 will go and it will complete, then P2 will start, then that will complete, and then P3 will start and complete. Now, if we take the average waiting time here, what we have is P1 didn't have to wait any period of time. P1 came and it executed immediately. Then P2 came at the same time, but it had to wait for the whole time P1 was executing, even though it came around the same time. And especially if considering P2 only needs 3 units of time to execute, it had to wait 24 times before executing for 3 times. Then similarly, P3, it needs like 4 times to execute, and it waited for 27 units of time. So what we would have is, in first come first serve, if a lot of jobs are coming around the same time, one of the disadvantages or one of the things that we would have is the average waiting time may be higher, because if we have different things taking a long time and the others are waiting for that whole period of time, then the average waiting time is going to be much higher, because all of these have fairly higher average waiting times. So one of the ways that we can solve this problem of average waiting time when we are doing first come first serve, and that is called making certain ways of prioritizing depending on the size of the job. Say for example, in this case, if we had known that P2 and P3 are shorter jobs compared to P1, and if we decided to give them the first chance, so they get to run first before P1, then it would be much different. So what we would have to do here is, we may have to have certain approaches. In, for example, in supermarkets, you may have this happening in supermarkets. In certain supermarkets, they will say there's like an express lane through which you can only go if you are buying only like 5 or less items, because there may be another person buying say 30-40 items in a large cart, and you may be there only buying like 1 packet of biscuit, and you have to stand behind them waiting until they finish billing all the 50 items. But if you were given some level of priority, you didn't have to wait for that whole period of time. Now even the other person is also not going to wait much longer, because compared to their processing time, your processing time is much less, so their waiting time in itself is also going to be less. So that is an approach that we can take. So that is taking the shorter jobs and giving them some level of priority compared to longer jobs. So the alternative algorithm that is going to solve that problem with first come first serve is what is called shortest job first. So what we have in shortest job first is, we have that same thing. We have all these different jobs of different sizes, but we would let the smaller one to process first. So that is, if you are the person in the supermarket queue with only 1 item, you will be given the first chance to put the bill before other people who are with more items to do that. But the requirement for that is to know how many items you have. because like we can only make that decision, say if you have 5 items, we can say okay, you can go through this line. But if we don't know that you may have 5 or 50 items, then we will not be able to make that decision in terms of scheduling. So we need to know what is the job duration, how long it will take to process before we can use this approach of shortest job first. And it will also be optimal only if we know that know about all the jobs at the beginning. Say for example, if we start at a particular point in time, if we say we start with one long job and one short job, and if we know about these two, then we can say run this first and run this second. But if we, for example, we start with a longer job and we have already started that, and then a small job comes, now we can't do anything, because in these systems we are not preemptively scheduling. We are letting that job to finish before we can start next. So this can only start here. So the requirement is, one, we need to know the job duration. So we need to know the job duration in advance. Then we would also like to have all the jobs available simultaneously. So all the jobs are available there simultaneously, and we know about these jobs. Then we can go and make a decision about how these jobs are function, or how these jobs can be scheduled. So again, if we take this example, what we have here is, we have 4 processors here. So P1 to P4. So they have said durations, and that is the order that they arrived. But by considering the duration, if we can find, by considering the duration, we can find P4 is the shortest, so that will be given the first priority. Then P1 is the second, P3 is the third, and P2 is the fourth. So if we prioritize like that and then execute, what we would have is P4 doesn't have to wait any time, and the others have to wait accordingly, and the average waiting time is 7. So the average waiting time here is going to be 7. On the other hand, if we do the same thing in the order of arrival itself, not by prioritizing on the job size, now say for example, P4 was the shortest job there, but it is now waiting for the longest period of time. P4 was the shortest, but it is now waiting for the longest period of time. But because of that, the average execution time is now much higher. The average execution time is much higher compared to using shortest job first. So in shortest job first, we had 7. Here we have 10.25. But between these two, they are not going to improve anything in terms of the total execution time. So between the shortest job first or using first come first serve, the average time is changing. The average time is better in shortest job first, but the overall execution time is still 24 and 24, because any job still needs to execute with whatever the duration that it has to execute. So that is not changing. So the total execution will not differ, but the average waiting time will differ, and that in itself is a good thing. But with uh, shortest job first, we may have some problems. So, one of the problems that we may have is, let's say we have two processes. One is the shorter process and the other one is a longer process. So, if we have shorter process, that shorter process will execute and the longer process will wait. But if we have a lot of shorter processes coming along the time, and every time when we compare with the available process, this longer process is always the longest. So it doesn't get a chance to execute. So we have a number of short processes running, but this long process is waiting because whenever it is compared to these other processes, these shorter processes will get picked up. So that is the problem that we would identify as what is called starvation. Then one of the other things that we identified is, for us to make this decision, for us to make a good decision about what is the shortest and what is the longest, we should have all the jobs available at the start. So that is one of the reasons why this is more suited for batch systems, because in batch system we will be able to understand about all the processes that is going to run as a batch, so we can make a decision about which is going to be the longest and which is going to be the shortest. So this is more suited for batch system because of that reason, that we need to know about all the processes at the beginning of the scheduling. So now we will look at scheduling algorithms for interactive systems. So in batch systems, we have certain things. That is the main thing that we tried was how we can avoid a lot more waiting time, but also how we can improve the throughput over time. But in interactive systems, we had different goals. Here we were focusing about responsiveness and things like that. So these scheduling algorithms will have to think about those things when they are doing scheduling. So again, here one of the simplest scheduling mechanisms that we can do is what is called round robin scheduling. So what we have here is, we have a set of processes. Again, they are going to wait in a queue. So they are in a queue, and from the queue, whatever that is in the front will be taken for processing, and then at the end of the processing, it will be sent back to the queue again. So it is like a preemptive one. It's a preemptive scheduling. That is, a process will be stopped from running and the next one will be chosen. But the process how we do that is, we go through this cycle with a queue of processes. So that is round robin scheduling, and that is again one of the common and simplest ways that we would schedule, even in sort of certain real time or real life scenarios. So here what we would have is, say here we have like say 3 processes, and each of them have let's say this durations, and that is the order that they are starting. So what we would do is, we would decide upon a time quantum that we are going to do the scheduling. So that is the time that we are going to give to each process. So the time quantum is, each process will be switched back after that time quantum is finished. So then we will go in that list, in that order. We will go like 1, 2, 3, then again 1, 2, 3. So we will go in that circle or in that cycle, one after the other. So in this case, again, we can calculate a particular waiting time by taking an average. But here the main thing to understand is, because this is the expectation is it needs to be responsive, all the processes are getting some processing time one after the other. So that is how we would run a round robin scheduling algorithm. some of the problems that we may have with round robin scheduling is, if we have too large or too long of a time slice, say in this example, if we take a time slice of 4, if our time slice is 4, then what would happen is P1 would start, it would go up to 4, and at that point P1 is already complete. So now P2 can start, then that is also will complete at 4, and then P3 can start, and that can run like that. So here in this situation, our quantum time was 4, and that is much higher. So because of that reason, what we would end up is a first in first out kind of a behavior. Because each process is given much longer time, we are not getting a much more responsive operating environment. So if we switch a lot between different processes, all of them are getting some processing time, so all of them can do things continuously. Whereas if we let one thing run for much longer, then it is going to be the others are waiting much longer, and we will end up with a situation where much is much similar to first in first out. Then on the other hand, if we have time slice much smaller, we are switching things much quicker, then the problem is, in reality, context switching is not going to be time free. So how that is going to be is, say if we start here, and that is the timeline, we run a process, then when we stop that process, we will have a small period of time that we need for context switching. So that is taking this process out and bringing the next process in. So then the next process can come, then we need a bit of time for context switching, and so on. We'll continue like that. But one of the problems that we will have is, if we have only very small windows for actual processing, and then we come back to the scheduling, the switching part, then we come back to processing, and then when we come back to switching. So here for example, say we spend say 25 milliseconds to process and 5 milliseconds to switch. Here if we do 5 and 5, here we will be, say, out of like it is like 5:1 is sort of the wastage or the time utilization that we have, whereas here we have 1:1 is wasted or not utilized for actual processing. So when we have very low time slice, we will have low CPU utilization. So if we have larger time slice, we will end up with a scenario where others are waiting longer, it becomes a first in first out. If we have very small first in time slice, we are spending more time switching and less time doing something, so then again we are wasting time. So for example, you can think about this in a sort of a simple example of using a laboratory computer or a device. So if 3 students have to use the laboratory computer, and each of them are doing an assignment that needs some time, say if everyone is given like half an hour, they can come work on the document, save it for now, give the chance to the next person, and they can come few turns and finish it. If one person is given, say, 4 hours, they may spend the whole time finishing it, but the others have to wait outside or wait for the chance to use that computer. But if everyone is given only, say, 2 minutes, and you can only have like come, open the document, you start typing, and that 2 minutes is coming close, so you have to save, and then you leave, and the next person. So most of the time you will waste in switching rather than actually doing something. So that is one of the challenges that we will have to think about, deciding on what is the time period that we will use for switching in round robin scheduling. And a typical sort of a time that we may use in sort of our sort of interactive computers may be 20 to 50 milliseconds, may be a reasonable time. Are there any questions so far? So, with round robin scheduling, one of the other problems that we will have is it assumes that all the processes are similar. So, in round robin scheduling, it is going in a cycle of processes, but there's no priority between processes. All of them are treated equally. So, this process and that process get the same sort of priority. But in sort of real computing environments, what we would have is different processes will have different priorities. Different things need more computing time, more processing time, may need more importance in the operation, and some may be less. So we need a scheduling algorithm that can cater to that, and that is one of the priority scheduling algorithms. So what we can do here is we may consider some of these other external factors and make a decision in terms of which needs to run first and which needs to which can not run in that higher priority. A typical example could be like checking an email in the background may be less of a priority compared to playing a video in a computer. So for example, if you are playing a video, your computer, your operating system needs to give priority to that process rather than to the process that is checking for emails in the background. So depending on that, what we can have is we can have a number of priorities. So we can have a number of priorities in a particular priority order, and then we can assign different processes to different priorities depending on the nature of the processes, and then we can execute them accordingly based on the process. So the higher priority ones will be given more chances, and the lower priority ones will be given less chances. So, and within this priority scheduling, within an individual process or individual level, individual queue, individual priority queue, again we may still use round robin there. So within this we may use round robin, but across this we may divide them into multiple priority queues. So then we could combine a number of these approaches into something else that is called multi-level feedback queues. So the simpler way to understand this is what we have here is the first one is it is a round robin queue. So we first have a round robin queue that we are running in that manner. Then we have a number of these queues in a priority level order. So we have a priority level order and we have a number of queues in these different priority level orders. Then what we would do is we would move processes between these queue levels as well. The reason being, in sort of real world in sort of interactive systems or real computing applications, again even priority may change at different points in time when an application is doing something. Say for example, an application, say if you have a media player, if that media player is playing a video, then decoding that video is a higher priority operation. But when that media player is still open but is not playing anything, that is not a higher priority process. So its priority may change from time to time. Similarly, even say in a sort of a word processing application, it may need certain additional times if it is going through a particular, say saving the document or something, where it may need sort of format conversion if you are saving it as a different format and things like that. It may need certain additional processing there, so it may need to go to higher priority, but in other times it may have lower priority. So in these real world applications, what we have is they are not always going to have the same priority. So at different times they may have different priorities, and we may be moving things across these different priority levels, and then within those priority levels we may execute them in sort of in a queue manner. Then the last type of algorithms that we can look at, last type of scheduling algorithms that we can look at is what is called algorithms for the real-time systems. So with real-time systems, one of the main things that we said is these are systems that need to keep up with the deadline. So one of the algorithms that we use for that is what is called the earliest deadline algorithm. So if we have a number of jobs and a job needs to finish at a particular period of time, we would try to finish the job that needs to be finished first. Say for example, if you are working on a number of assignments, you would work to finish the assignment that has the first deadline, then you would work on the assignment that has a later deadline. So we would prioritize based on these deadlines, and we would work on the one, the scheduling will prioritize based on which has the earliest deadline. So that is why we would call it an algorithm that has earliest deadline. So here what we have is the one with the earliest deadline will be prioritized. Then we can also briefly look at thread scheduling. So in terms of thread scheduling, it is going to be, in terms of the scheduling algorithms and things like that are going to be similar, but where it is going to differ is in terms of where these threads are at. So we know that threads can be either user level threads or kernel level threads. So user level threads will be managed by the processes themselves, and kernel level threads will be managed by the operating system. And based on that, what can happen is, with user level threads, the kernel will only pick the process, and there should be a scheduler inside the process to do that scheduling for threads. Whereas for kernel level threads, the kernel itself can go and pick the threads directly, because at kernel level threads, kernel knows what are the threads and it can do the scheduling for threads as well. Whereas for user level threads, kernel doesn't know about the existence of threads. Those are implemented inside the process. So the process needs to have an additional scheduler component built into the process to do the thread scheduling. So that is sort of the main difference depending on the type of thread scheduling. Type of thread, the scheduling may slightly differ. But other than that, the algorithms and the approaches that we may take for scheduling threads is much similar to how we would do for processes as well. So if we have, say, this process has a number of threads, kernel can only know about this process or the process, it will only pick that. Whereas for kernel level threads, the kernel itself will know what are the specific threads that exist in each of the process. So it can go into processing like that. And one of the other possibilities that we can have with these two is with user level threads, we would always, when we are switching back and forth, that switching back and forth can only happen between processes. So if we have user level threads, we will go from process A, process B, then inside that it may take thread 1 and thread 2. So it will have to go one process, other process, and that order. Whereas if we have kernel level threads, it can pick any kernel, any thread from any process by the kernel knows of, and scheduling can happen in that order. So that order doesn't depend on the process. The kernel can decide upon which thread to pick from the overall threads that are available there. So that's all we have to discuss in terms of scheduling. And with scheduling, so it's about deciding like what to run next and what we will be doing. So that's the main thing that we do. And there are a number of scheduling algorithms that we have. And these scheduling algorithms and how they do that will depend on the nature of systems. So for example, for batch systems, the priority or the goal will be different to interactive systems and real-time systems. So that is something that we would do depending on the type of system. We may employ different scheduling algorithms. And then threads and processors will use sort of similar approaches as well in terms of scheduling. So the concepts are equally applicable to both. So that's it for scheduling. But today, what we are going to have next is to talk about an assignment that you will have. But before that, there is a question. So how a process is divided into threads? So a process cannot be divided into threads by the operating system. That will have to be done by the programmers to make that distinction. So it could be based on certain ways that you write the program and then how that is constructed within that particular operating system libraries and so on. The programmer will have to decide what is a thread, and operating system will be able to know that. So if the programmer writes it in a way and writes it as sort of kernel threads, the operating system will be able to know that, but operating system cannot make a decision in terms of to make threads. So say for example, a simpler application could be, say, the example that we looked last week is in a word processor, receiving user input and typing and formatting, doing spell checks in the background and auto-saving files in the background. So if these are the three activities, the application developer has to write these tasks separately in a way that they can be executed separately, so they can be grouped into what is called threads, and then the operating system may be able to function on them separately. But if they have not written the program in that way, the operating system will not be able to utilize the advantages of having threads. So if we want to use threading, multi-threading, the programming itself need to take that into account and do things accordingly. So you may use certain programming libraries to enable that, or you may manually program that, but it needs to be part of the program. So are there any other questions? If not, we will just look into the continuous assessment that that is available to you from this lesson. So as we said, we will have a number of continuous assessment over the course, and not from every lesson, but maybe every other lesson, or like depending on how the time goes, we may have to do like about 4 continuous assessments within the semester. So this week what you have is this. Are there any questions about the assessment or what you need to do? So in summary, you will pick one of these topics based on the index number. You will write a short paragraph or a short report up to like 500 to 750 words, put it in a text file, document file, upload it onto LMS. And one of the things that you may do in this context is make utilize of the earliest deadline algorithm and finish this assignment first before other assignments starts to come. And then you are not saying that there are a lot of assignments only towards the deadline. if you start it early, you will not have that problem. So that is also something that you can do. So if there are no other questions, and I don't see any other particular questions, we may conclude the lesson with this. And as always, you may contact me, send me a message on WhatsApp directly or on the group or through LMS or email if you have any questions or if there are any clarifications that you need about the continuous assessment as well. So if there's nothing else, let's conclude for the day and see you next week. Thank you for joining. Bye.